Imagine strolling into a quiet town as the sun sets, only to feel an unimaginable tension in the air. The atmosphere tells you, you're not welcome here, not because of anything you've done, but because of the color of your skin. This isn't a scene from a history book or a movie from the 1800s. This is a tale of reality that some people still experience today, right here in America. Sundown towns are places where Black people and other minorities were systematically segregated and threatened with violence. If they stayed outside after dark, they are often perceived as remains of a racist past. But here's the shocking truth. Some of these towns still exist in America. Shocking, right? In this video, we'll unveil some of these towns across America where these practices still go on today. We'll explore the chilling history, expose their current realities, and share useful tips that will help you stay safe if you ever find yourself in this situation. This is one of America's darkest secrets, one that continues to affect us in ways we can't even think about. This is more than just history. This is a story of survival in places where prejudice and fear still roam about freely. Let's expose the truth about sundown towns that still exist today, and why it's important to stay alert. Let's begin. To have a good understanding of this hidden reality of sundown towns today, we need to journey down the lines of history. After the Civil War, millions of Black Americans who were newly freed sought opportunities in a country that promised equality, but did the opposite. When the Reconstruction era ended, racial violence became very intense across America. Jim Crow laws officially standardized segregation, but some communities took it more seriously and went to an extreme length. This created a restraint for Black people across the town. They were not allowed to live, work, or even exist once the sun went down. These towns were known as Sundown Towns. White residents used intimidation, violence, and harsh policies to implement their rules of exclusion. They put up signs at town borders, warning Black travelers to leave by sundown or prepare for the worst that could happen. But how did they do this? Through a blend of public and secret strategies. Some towns passed local ordinances that banned Black people outright. Others depended on terror, threats, physical assaults, or mob violence to pursue Black families out. Even housing covenants and bank loan policies ensured that Black people couldn't buy property in these places. Take Anna, Illinois, for example. The name itself became a grim acronym, Ain't No End Torcharas. The town's hostility and vicious attitude towards Black residents was not a hidden gameplay. It was enforced through racial practices that lasted from generation to generation. Anna, Illinois remains one of the most infamous sundown towns. Though its infamous Ain't No Nons Allowed acronym is no longer widely acknowledged, Black travelers still report feeling unwelcome in the area. Goshen, Indiana, is another example in this category. During the early 1900s, it used to be an exclusively white town that was enforced through violence and systematic exclusion. Even after several decades, its racial attributes did not change. By the 1930s, there were thousands of sundown towns across the United States, from the depth of the South to the Midwest and even the Pacific Northwest. No region was immune. These towns became racial domains, where white supremacy was pierced into the very fabric of daily life. Though some of these practices subsided with the civil rights movement, the legacy of sundown towns can still be felt today. Their history isn't just an occurrence, but a foundational piece of America's racial disparity that influenced where and how communities live till this present day. This unimaginable chapter in American history might seem like it belongs in the past, but as we'll observe, the story of sundown towns is far from being over. Let's expose how these towns continue to operate behind the scenes and how they affect Black travelers and residents today. Sundown towns aren't just a historic narrative of America's past. Although many have removed their infamous signs and public threats, their legacy persists in ways that are harder to pinpoint but just as dangerous. Today, some towns still enforce racial exclusion through quite yet powerful means. However, the blatant signs are almost not practiced anymore. but the effects of decades of segregation are impossible to ignore. Let's take a look at towns like Pierce City, Missouri, or Harrison, Arkansas. These countries are populated with over 95% white, despite being located in states with significant black populations. These demographics are not coincidental. They're the result of historical and ongoing exclusion. In numerous towns, policies like strict zoning laws or rental restrictions are strategies that are used to discourage racial diversity. Local officials and residents often justify these measures under the guise of preserving the community's character and reputation. In some towns, police are used as weapons of intimidation, disproportionately stopping, questioning, or even arresting minorities. This harassment sends a clear message: you're not welcome here. Let's look at some case study. Vidor, Texas. Vidor, Texas is a town that has a notorious reputation that persists to this day. Once a stronghold of the Ku Klux Klan, it remains a predominantly white town. Black visitors and residents have repeatedly reported feelings of discomfort and outrightly receiving hostile treatment. While some locals argue that the town has repented from its past behavior, the lack of diversity and persistent reports of racism says otherwise. Harrison, Arkansas is another town with a rugged history and a present that raises eyebrows. The town has struggled to shake off its reputation, with multiple hate groups reportedly headquartered nearby. Visitors have shared their experiences of being met with stares and a palpable sense of discomfort. The numbers tell the story. Decades of exclusion have left a lasting mark on the town's population and reputation. These case studies aren't isolated incidents. They're part of a broader pattern of towns that maintain practices and attitudes that continue to exclude black people and other minorities while no longer openly sundown. During an interview with some black individuals recounting modern-day experiences, one of them said, "I was just passing through a small town in Mississippi when I noticed the way people looked at me. It was like they'd never seen a black person before, and I didn't stick around to find out what might happen." Another person said, "I tried renting an apartment in a small town in Oregon, and suddenly the landlord said it was no longer available. A white friend called the next day, and magically it was open again." Stories like these aren't hard to find. They serve as chilling reminders that the spirit of sundown towns still lingers, even if the approach has changed. These modern echoes of sundown towns show us that the history of racism in America isn't concealed in the past. It's a living legacy that influenced where people feel safe or unsafe, even today. Sundown towns don't just define where people live or not, but they also define who feels welcome, safe, and valued in America. The effects of these towns go far beyond their borders and leave scars on individuals and communities alike. For most black travelers and other minorities, the presence or mere reputation of sundown towns can create a constant dilemma of fear and anxiety. Having a consciousness that there are places where you're unwelcome or worse, unsafe, can create long-term psychological and mental stress. It stirs up feelings of alienation and inflicts generational trauma. A black traveler recounting an experience of being harassed. In her words, "I can't describe the fear I felt when I realized the town I'd stopped in was hostile to people like me." That kind of fear sticks with you for as long as you can imagine. Economically, sundown towns pay a price for their exclusionary practices. By driving out or discouraging diverse populations, they lose out on talented workers, vibrant cultures, and collaboration with thriving businesses. Towns that exclude minorities usually struggle to attract businesses and investments. They miss out on the economic benefits of cultural and racial diversity, which include innovation, collaboration, and a broader consumer base. The stark contrast is clear. Inclusive communities thrive, while sundown towns often remain stagnant and trapped by the very policies and attitudes they uphold. Sundown towns also contribute to systemic inequality on a broader national scale. By putting restrictions on where minorities can live, they limit access to quality education, job opportunities, wealth, and career building. Decades of exclusion create a ripple effect that forces families out of sundown towns and often move to overcrowded urban areas with fewer resources. Generations also lost access to property ownership, one of the primary ways to build wealth in America, and the cycle of systemic poverty and discrimination continued to persist. This was also about reinforcing a racial hierarchy that has long-lasting consequences. Even today, the existence of these towns creates deep disparity within communities. For some, knowing that such places still exist is a painful reminder of how far America has yet to go. For those of us who live in a world that was influenced by sundown towns, the impact is deeply personal. It's about more than just avoiding certain places, but about reclaiming the freedom to exist anywhere without fear. The lasting impact of sundown towns serves as a stark reminder of how racism had eaten deep into America's fabric. But understanding this legacy isn't just about uncovering the past, but also about creating a future where everyone belongs and feels comfortable. For Black travelers and other minorities, staying safe means staying informed. Here's how you can identify sundown towns and protect yourself in potentially hostile areas. Recognizing a sundown town today isn't always straightforward, but certain signs can help you identify areas that may still hold on to these exclusionary practices. Start with the numbers. If a town has a disproportionately white population, despite being in a diverse region, it's worth investigating why. In most cases, it's not a coincidence. A lack of diversity could point to a legacy of exclusion. Communication with people who live close to you. Most times, neighboring communities are aware of towns with histories of racism or hostility toward Black travelers and outsiders. Pay attention to coded language. Terms like maintaining the town's character or complaints about outsiders can hint at unspoken biases. You can also search online. Websites, forums, and even apps document towns with troubling reputations to get a first-hand account from travelers and residents. Preparation is key when traveling through unfamiliar areas, especially rural or isolated towns. Additionally, you can research ahead of time. Before you hit the road, research your route. Apps like the Green Book Project and websites like sundowntowns.org can provide valuable insights into potentially unsafe areas. Secondly, plan your stops carefully. Avoid making unplanned stops in towns with troubling histories, especially after or close to dark. Stick to well-traveled highways and major cities where diversity is more common. Avoid the lonely route. Stay aware of your surroundings. If you find yourself in an unfamiliar town, be mindful of how people react to your presence and greetings. Watch for hostile stares, unwelcoming attitudes, or unusual attention from law enforcement officers. Sometimes you find yourself in a strange town and you feel unsafe. Here's what you should do if you find yourself in a situation where you feel unwelcome or unsafe. Trust your instincts. Your safety comes first. Avoid confrontations. Don't engage in hostility. Instead, leave the area as quickly and quietly as possible. Call for help. If you feel threatened, call 911 or a trusted friend to alert them to your location. Share your live location if possible. Stick to public spaces. If you can't leave immediately, stay in well-lit, public areas where others can see you. Avoid remote spaces or side streets. Traveling with others is always safer. A group is less likely to be targeted than an individual. It's also important to share your itinerary. Let someone you trust know your travel plans, especially if you're driving through rural areas. Regular check-ins can provide an extra layer of safety. Try to document incidents along your journey or stay. If you encounter racism or hostility, document what happens. Record dates, times, and details. This information can be helpful if you choose to report the incident or warn others. While the existence of sundown towns is a sobering reminder of America's racial history, staying prepared and vigilant can help you overcome these challenges. Remember, your safety matters, and knowledge is your greatest tool. Although the consequences of sundown towns cast a long shadow, People and organizations across the country are taking bold steps to fight against these exclusionary practices and build a more inclusive future where everyone is welcome, regardless of race or culture. Local activists are confronting these towns' racist histories head-on. They're demanding accountability and change through protests, petitions, and public discussions. Educational initiatives also play a crucial role in fighting against these violent acts of segregation. Historians, educators, and activists are unveiling the hidden stories behind these towns and ensuring that future generations understand their consequences. Some towns are choosing to confront their past voluntarily. These communities are proving that change is possible by acknowledging their histories and actively working toward inclusivity. While the journey to dismantle racism in America is far from over, its progressive story reminds us of what's possible when people stand together for justice and equality. The legacy of Sundown Towns is a sad reminder of America's troubled past. But by creating awareness of this history, we take the first step toward dismantling the systems that uphold it. As we fight for a more inclusive future, it is important to stay vigilant, informed, and committed to change. Because everyone deserves to feel safe anytime, anywhere, everywhere.
Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Martin Luther King, Jr.